So my friends have this group called the Seven of Clubs, and I thought it'd be fun to make them a sign of their logo. So the first thing I did was bring their logo into Fusion 360 as a canvas, and then traced the image around the whole thing so that I had the file that I could use to then send to the plasma cutter. I'm cutting this out of 3mm steel, and the plasma cutter is pretty good at this. I wouldn't push it up anything past maybe 5mm. And it has a little bit of an edge that you'll see that I have to kind of clean up afterwards, but it does a pretty quick job. It's pretty simple to program. You want to make sure that you're cutting inside of your pieces that you're going to dispose of, or the parts that aren't going to be seen, as well as cut around on the outside, your lead ins and leads out. That's pretty simple to program in. And it can leave a lot of spatter and metal bits everywhere if everything's not, nicely programmed and focused well. But you're going to have to clean up on the plasma cutter compared to, say, a water jet cutter, which I'll show in another future video. But either way, that's the name of the game. You can see that some of the edges are only maybe 3mm thick, which is a perfect, thing for steel. And this is just a big shot of the entire bed of the plasma cutter. It can do quite a bit of material. I've got some other things that I was doing with ceramics and dyes for extrusion. So that's what those other weird shapes are. But we'll get into that later on. After that's the cleanup. So it leaves this rough edge that you gotta sand out and file out, as well as all that spatter that we were talking about before. So I'm just using a file and only a couple passes and it cleans it right up. I know this is a bad reenactment because, let's face it, it's just for the camera to show what I'm talking about. But you get the idea. It's also important to see the amount of rust that's already been created from the plasma cutter on the underside. This is the underside, obviously, of the Seven of Clubs that we're looking at. I then polished it a lot with steel wool. I knew that I wanted to make this darker and a lot more interesting, so I'm going to add super glue to it, which you'll see in just a minute. So you want to make sure that it's really clean before you darken it. I noticed that one of the sides of the 7 would act as a really nice handle, so I wanted to make sure that that was really clean and really nice to the touch. Again, you want to clean everything with acetone so that there's no oil at all on the metal. Now this is the Super Blue special stuff. Be sure to pour it into another cup or container. You don't want to use your brush directly on your metal and then back into the original Super Blue, back and forth, because you're just going to add more little metal flakes inside of your Super Blue, and it's not going to be that strong. I've done other metal things in the past, and those immediately changed and had a lot of dark character. This steel was treated with something, and it was kind of taking a while to interact. Some of the Super Blues do take, 15 minutes or even up to an hour to interact, but this Super Blue is supposed to do it immediately, or do it really quickly. But I don't know, there was some sort of weird casing on the outside of that steel that even when I sanded it and polished it, it was still taking a while. But you just let it do its time, and you can see that now it's starting to come up with those really interesting patterns and contrasts and dark colors. So after the Super Blue is done, you want to wash it off with water and just let it dry, which is what I'm doing here. And you can see kind of these patterns that are coming out. Really interesting. But once it's dry after this, you want to coat it with oil, and you want to make sure that you give a lot of oil in this. It doesn't really matter what kind of oil. So now we have this Seven of Clubs logo, which on its own would look really cool. And maybe you put up a nail and it would hang in the middle of that top hole. But I thought it'd be interesting to also have some sort of, carrying case for it. What if you're going to put it in your bag and the corners poke? You've just got this sharp metal poking out of your bag. So I took a scrap piece of wood and went to my CNC machine in the shed and made the relief cut of that image, of that shape, onto the wood. I wanted it to all be in one piece. So now I've got this big hunk of wood, and I'm getting my master's at University College London in architecture here, so I have access to the entire shop. And rather than try to plane it and cut it at my house where I don't have those tools, I just decided to bring it to school. I thought this was kind of fun, of drilling 2 holes in the side of it that were going to be cut off anyways, and making that as my handle, since it was too big to put in a bag and I kind of wanted to show it off. I wanted to lower the thickness of that wood, so I had one of the technicians run it through the joiner. It's not the safest way to do it for this big piece of wood, but in the end we got it done right. I then trimmed up the sides and wanted to have the whole thing all the same tone, so I sanded off all of that top coat of whatever was varnished on there. Now to attach the steel onto the piece of wood, I had these rare earth magnets that are pretty strong, and this is a little reenactment since I did it on the wood and didn't film it, but I just drilled a hole in the top of it and put some epoxy inside and put in the magnet, and it holds it great. There seems to be a little bug on my hand that also approves of it. So I coated it in oil a couple times, and to make sure that you can pop it out, I thought maybe I could use the handle on where the side of that 7 of clubs is and drill out that whole thing, or I could just drill out a small hole in the bottom of the logo and then be able to push it out if you wanted to. So you have the option to either leave the steel on its own or in the nice wooden frame, and I thought the wooden piece was just for kind of transportation, but it really is kind of a nice contrast, and I think I would leave the whole thing as it is with both parts. So to show this in the most dramatic way possible to some of the members of the club, we were having another meeting at their house, and I thought this would be a perfect time to display it to everybody. So this is their reaction.
I made the 7 of Clubs logo, but I did a couple things. One, I made it out of steel in the first place and plasma cut it. Yep. And then, and then I saw it and I was like, oh, that would look cool just hanging up. And I was like, wait, no. If you're gonna bring it from somewhere to another place, it'd be nice to like have the corners not stab you. So then I CNC'd this, and I put a magnet on the back of it. And so.
And then the other side is a cutting board.
Enough? That magnet enough to
You can use it as a cutting board.
Can you use it as a cutting board?
Wow.
And you can push it out through the back.
It just
And I
looks
have,
very nice.
Very cool.
I have a.
Wow.
Is it on the joke?
That's what Joe makes.
Bring us to keep making.